Welcome everyone to episode 29 of Future Strong. My name's Nikki Garchea, co-founder of Capfinity. I'm delighted to, as always, be accompanied by the wonderful Lindsay Pollock and also today by Alex La Via. So for those of you who've never listened to Future Strong, and the audience is growing every 2 weeks, Lindsay and I talk about all things that make graduates and Gen Z stronger. And it fits really well with the Capfinity mission of strengthening the world and all of our work with Gen Z and volume hiring and development. So Lindsay, over to you, and perhaps you'll explain why I'm pixelated today.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Hello, everyone. Please introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know where you are watching from. Nikki is in the Capfinity offices in the UK. And Nikki, you're going a little bit in and out. Right now, you are not pixelated. So we're enjoying the excitement of your video issues, but so far, so good. I'm based in New York City, where we are at the beginnings of what looks like a snowstorm. So very excited over here and so happy to have all of you again. Please tell us where you are watching from. My name is Lindsay Pollock. I'm the author of 4 career and workplace books. My latest is Recalculating, Navigate Your Career Through the Changing World of Work. I am also a proud ambassador for Capfinity and work closely with Nikki, which is such a great joy. But more importantly, we are excited to welcome all of you and introduce our fabulous guest. Alex, I am so energized for this conversation about digital well-being. Can you introduce yourself and tell us your story? What do you do and how did you get involved in this work?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you so much for having me here and everyone joining as well. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today. So my name is Alex La Via. I am the founder of an organisation called Live More Offline. And I got into digital wellbeing really after noticing the impact of digital habits in my own life, both at work and at home. And it started in my career as a corporate accountant, and finding that I was working first within Big Four accountancy and then in multinational head offices where we were working with different time zones, and I was constantly connected to technology and struggling to find that balance. So that was kind of the beginning of my curiosity around the impact of digital habits on human well-being. And this curiosity then took me into a kind of academic research, also a moment of kind of realization on a long walk on the Camino de Santiago in Spain, where I kind of suddenly had this wake up kind of moment that I wanted to look at this. This was a real passion. So I did academic research into the impact of technology on well-being, and now kind of started talking about it, got invited to speak at organizations, and now work with organizations and their early careers teams, their leaders, to create healthier digital practices.
Incredible, Alex. And I love hearing your story because I can just picture you in the location and the kind of realization that was going on. And I know that you were addicted to your BlackBerry as well, which for anyone listening in Gen Z may have never heard of, but it was a thing. We'll just leave it at that.
And
so one of the first questions that we want to ask you is, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges facing Gen Z at the moment from a digital well-being perspective?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, I think it's well known that Gen Z are, kind of struggling from a stress perspective more than any other generation. And when we look at, in particular in the workplace, what contributes to stress and to overload, we see that one of the greatest struggles that people report is constant connection to an always-on working day. In fact, this came out top in a large-scale poll by Buffer as being the greatest challenge. And that constant connection, that pressure to be available at, all times of the day is a generational issue. So when we look at the data, it's younger people within organizations that feel this pressure to be connected even more. And perhaps that's natural. You feel that pressure to be wanting to demonstrate that you're adding value, that you're contributing. But the problem in a digital world is adding value and contributing the same thing as being connected to your inbox at 8, 9 p.m. And what we've seen is that, people's working days have lengthened in the pandemic. And, for many, that's not gone back to a normal baseline. So I think that is an absolutely vital challenge to address, is creating healthy habits around the boundaries at the beginning and the end of a working day, and having realistic beliefs and expectations.
So if you think about people who are watching who are managers of people, whether they're on a college campus mentoring students or their own teams, or managers in organizations, what can a manager do? I think setting really clear boundaries is a good example, but how do you model that behavior yourself? I think, which is really important. But what can you actually do, especially as we go into this hybrid, remote, who knows, working environment? It's very complicated and there are no exact rules about this stuff. So what are some strategies that you teach in your workshops to managers?
Oh, I love everything you're saying there about modeling, and also that it's complicated. Like, both of those are so key. So I think, well, firstly, let's tackle the second. It is complicated and it's different for every team. So there is no kind of like set formula here to apply. It is far more nuanced and complicated than that, because people's preferences are different, people's work structures are different, people's requirements to be online at particular times are different in different teams. So it has to fit individuals and it has to fit the business at the same time. So it's complicated, but there is a lot that managers can do. And I think the keys there, I would say, to start with, are explicit expectations. So when we look at the reasons why people work late, the top reason is workload, but the next three are all things like wanting to get promoted, wanted to impress their managers. So actually, a lot of that comes to people's perceptions of what managers believe and what they are rewarding. So if you are a manager, being really kind of aware of what your beliefs are to start with, and then explicitly communicating those expectations. So that could be, setting within a team, having a conversation about when do we need to be connected? Is there other ways that we can work together to have a rota system to cover particular times so that not everyone is connected at all times of the day? That kind of explicit conversation is key. But as you said, modeling as well. So knowing that a leader's own behaviors set the tone for a team, and leaders need help in having balance themselves, but also how to kind of cascade that within a team.
I want to really dig on this, Alex, for managers, because I'm so fascinated by this topic. Can you be really specific? Like, what's a rule that someone might not think to set? Because I think we often say, I will not check after 8 p.m. And of course we check after 8 p.m., right? Or, I will not do X, Y, and Z. What are some really reasonable rules or boundaries to set that you find really make a difference?
Absolutely. So speed of response guidance is a key one. So I worked with a group who had a real issue with Slack constantly getting in the way of their productivity. It was always pinging, and there was this stress about whether they needed to be constantly replying to messages. What this group did after a kind of workshop and group discussion was put in place a rule that no Slack message needed a reply within 2 hours. And instantly, then you can just feel the release of tension that comes with that. It's like you can actually do a piece of focused work for 45 minutes and not feel that anxiety that you should be checking. So that's one big thing. Putting in place speed of response guidance is a key one. The others, delaying delivery. A lot of people talk about this, but emailing with the recipient in mind. So if you're working late and you want to be working late, fine. That's the value of flexibility in remote work. But is there anything that you can do then to delay the delivery of your email so you hit send, but that it only arrives when the person who's receiving it is next working? And being really conscious about that. And also, if you're working with a team, if you're replying to emails late, are you then putting a pressure on other people within your team to also be replying to emails late if they are not needed? So just being really conscious about things like that.
Thanks so much, Alex. And I'm just going to address some of the comments that are now coming in. Clearly, this morning, LinkedIn Live video is playing up. Trudy Steinfeld is maybe blaming it on the blizzard that Lindsay mentioned at the start. So I think we have some people happily watching on YouTube. But for those of you in audio, we'll make sure that we vocally present everything as best we can. And it's great to have Alex La Via with us to talk about digital well-being. So great advice there from a managerial perspective. I'm interested, I guess, like everyone is, and this is my first LinkedIn Live in the office, so I'm completely kind of practicing, I guess, what everyone is experiencing at the moment, that sometimes we're in and sometimes we're at home. And you mentioned at the beginning that can have quite a big impact from a digital wellbeing perspective, because we're navigating this boundary issue even more than we were before the pandemic. But would you just share, Alex, both some of the things that you've noticed and heard in this hybrid world, and maybe some of the hints and tips that we might be able to pick up to help manage the blurred lines we have between work and home now?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, again, it's being aware that different people's experiences of hybrid and remote work are very different. So when we look at the research, Microsoft showed, well, they polled people during remote work as to whether they were thriving or surviving in remote work. And what they found was that leaders, 61% would say that they're thriving, but Gen Z, it was only 40% who would say that they are thriving. So quite often we look through the lens of our own perspective. So when you are moving into hybrid work, the first question would be, actually, what is everybody else's experience? And do I actually know what their experience of hybrid work is? Do I know what their challenges are? Because whether you're living alone or whether you're at the start of your career and you've not yet built the networks that you need, your experience will be incredibly different. So that would be the start, listening and kind of finding out what the challenge is and what you're already doing well. And then based on that information, kind of looking at what would be most beneficial to put in place to make hybrid work in the best way for everyone, and being aware that you might have some people that are working more frequently from home, some people that are working more frequently from the office. And if it's like a lot of the research, would show, is that those who are working predominantly or more from home might well be people who have caring responsibilities, females, or those with other reasons that make it harder to come into the office. So being really aware of whether then we start to give people different experiences based on whether they are more predominantly in the office or more predominantly at home. And that could be things like noticing, for instance, the way in which we're judging people's performance. So if you are in the office, are you making an assumption that people are working because they're just sat behind their laptop in view? Because we all know that people can be looking at Facebook in an office environment. It doesn't necessarily mean that kind of being seen to be sat behind your laptop means you're working. But equally, if your light on Teams has gone amber and you're working remotely, does that mean that you're not working? So noticing if you're applying double standards to people as well in terms of how you're judging their work. So I think that's vital in trying to make sure that a digital experience is not substandard to a face-to-face experience, so that you're not inadvertently causing any kind of discrimination within a kind of workplace. So they're just a few things.
It's so interesting. I just want to welcome Fred Burke, who is such a strong supporter of our show. Welcome, Fred. Brian Reeves. Thank you to those who are watching us on YouTube. If there are some glitches on LinkedIn, thanks, Haley, for jumping in. In thinking about hybrid environments and not judging where people are, I was reading about a company where any meeting where people are in person, they designate one person in the live meeting to sort of be the liaison with the people who are remote. I thought that was such a clever idea. The issue that I always have is just the number of ways we can communicate. So in a given day, I am in my inbox, but I also have some communities that use Slack, but I also am in a couple of WhatsApp groups. And then I have my phone next to me with text messages. And then occasionally somebody leaves a voicemail and maybe somebody knocks on the door. There's so many methods. How do you sort through that as a team? Is it about, being explicit? Because sometimes I think a text is a better way with a particular topic, and sometimes it's not. So how do you manage just the sheer volume of different methods we have of communicating? I'm purely asking this for selfish reasons, because I think that's my biggest struggle. I can manage my email inbox. I've gotten there, but it's just the fact that I'm managing that, and then suddenly 5 texts come in.
We run this entire show for selfish means. We're essentially
yes, of course. It's just for our own
every 2 weeks.
Our own careers. Yes, good point. Thank you for pointing that out and telling everybody our secret.
It's a great forum for that. Well, I think, absolutely brilliant. Brilliant question. And I think that so I had a client who did an audit of the number of communications channels they used, and they came up with 21, which is just utterly incredible. But it adds up. It really does add up. So their solution is looking at creating so I talk about communications charters, and one kind of subset of that is looking as a team as when do we use email? When, and that would link into the speed of response guidance as well. That would be, we send email for these types of communications that we don't require a response within 4 hours, say. We use WhatsApp if we need to send something that is more kind of urgent, perhaps. But then you can also put guidelines around. So I have collaborators that I work with asynchronously quite a lot. And the rules that I've put in place are kind of emails for when we're sharing documents and big kind of meaty bits of information. But also we have a WhatsApp channel open, but we have both muted that WhatsApp channel so that we only look at it during working hours, so that I know that if I'm working at a different time, I can send her a voice note, because I actually think that voice communication, video communication can be so much more powerful than written communication as well. So I'll just leave a few voice notes, but no, we've got an explicit agreement that she does not need to look at that until she's working. And I'm not expecting there to be any kind of responses until she's working. So that's the way to do it, is by team, look at how are you working? What type of communications have you got? What channels do you want each one of those to go through? And then which is superfluous? So are there some that you can just remove off the back of that? And then secondly, can you reduce the number of communications in the very first place by working in a different way too? And the things that I like to advocate there are things like shared documents, having really clear processes where actually everyone already knows, this bit happens, then that happens, then that happens. So you're not having to email around for status updates, kind of where is this information? A lot of those unnecessary kind of emails as well. So all comes down to intentionality, planning, and just kind of setting it out as a team.
Nikki gets the next question, but I vote for WhatsApp and Slack to go away.
I'm just getting over 21 forms of communication. I'm just waiting for one of my team to come in to comment to say, we've got 28 at Capfinity. I'm tracking through how many could we have. But I do love the idea of the charter. And I think for new joiners, that is such a quick shorthand for people, and particularly at these times when there's so many unwritten rules of how we do things. Linked to that, do you have any tips or views on how to onboard Gen Z well at these times? Any examples of people really doing nice things? I think the communication charter I would add into that bucket, but anything else, Alex, from an onboarding perspective?
Yeah, so I think there is a lot. So at Live More Offline, we talk about 3 pillars of a healthy digital culture. So we look at it as not just being well-being, but actually touches into digital well-being. So all around balance, being able to switch off, digital productivity, all about the impact of our constant distractions and our ability to focus and be creative, and virtual connection, about how we can actually build human connection and culture and belonging in a digital space. So I would look at that question through those three lenses: well-being, productivity, human connection. And I think on the human connection piece, what comes out very strongly from the research is the power of networks, and the fact that networks are so much harder to create in a digital remote environment than they are in a face-to-face environment. So there, again, it comes down to intentionality. So in that onboarding, are people kind of, how well are people managing to get to know other people within the organization, and are there things that you can put in place to champion those opportunities to connect? And they can be small things, such as in a team meeting, say, opening up the meeting 15 minutes before the start time and then sending people straight away into breakout rooms in groups of 3, so that those who want to connect and to meet other people get the opportunity to dial in early, but you're not forcing kind of a connection time period on others that are maybe too busy or don't want to partake. So that is just one example. Or there are others that I know some groups use a kind of plugin called Donuts that will randomly kind of link people together to have kind of connection chats. So you can do things like that as well. So the networks there, that's absolutely vital. And then I think on the performance and well-being, it would actually be including training on digital well-being, digital productivity in your early careers cohorts, because the habits that we create in the first year of our careers, really have an impact for the whole of the rest of our working lives. And focus is going to be one of the most highly valued and kind of most challenged skills of the future of work. People are talking about shorter attention spans, challenges to be able to focus. A lot of that comes down to our digital habits. So if you are someone who's managed to master the ability to cut through a lot of that noise and be able to focus in your work, and you master that in the first year of your career, goes on to really stand you in incredible stead for the rest of your career as well. So these are key skills that we need to be working with our new starters on as well.
I love that so much. My daughter is going to be entering what we call middle school or junior high school, and they talk about how they teach time management because they have to learn new habits and skills to be in that next level of schooling. And why don't we do that with work, right? To say, okay, this is now a next level opportunity. And it's interesting. I spend a lot of time on my slide decks for my presentations, and I maybe spend 2 or 3 hours. And I spoke to a colleague who said, I spend 20 minutes. What do you do? And she sat next to me and watched me. And she said, well, what if you did this, this, and this? And it just never occurred to me. So I think if we standardized or taught how to do these things, we could save people so much time and struggle. So I love that idea of talking about it and teaching it, because I don't know how you check your email. You might do something that is a really simple tip that just never occurred to me. I love that. And I just want to shout out Catherine Butler, who agrees that multiple Slack channels are just the bane of our existence. Catherine, I summarized what you said and made it more intense to agree with me, but thank you for understanding my pain and suffering. Alex, where are we going? What do you predict is coming next? Particularly, I know everybody wants to know with hybrid and all that, but what are we going to be talking about a year from now? And I think in particular, I know I identify as a Gen Xer, Nikki does as well. Many of our participants might be Xers or Boomers. I never want to also make assumptions that Gen Zs see the world the same way I do. They might want to, be slacking more than I do, and I have to adapt to that. So where do you see this kind of, particularly for the Gen Zs, going in the next 12 months or so?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think so what we've seen in polls is that for Gen Z, and I guess also kind of noting that these are broad generalizations too, but there are trends across the generations. So not everyone will be the same, but on the whole, Gen Z have a really strong drive and care about well-being within the workplace. I think they've seen a lot of the millennials maybe those old working practices of working, ridiculous hours, and are now kind of thinking, well, actually, that's not the life that I want to live. I want to work work to live, you know, and it's not about selling your soul and having an early retirement and then kind of living, you know, kind of in your retired years. So I think the focus on well-being is absolutely vital, and you actually do see people now, you know, reporting that those questions are asked of hiring managers in job interviews. You know, what do you actually do to support well-being within your workplace? And I think that is where change happens. Actually, it's not from policy or legislation. It's actually when a certain group who are driving a market have a desire or expectation and are acting upon that desire or expectation. And here I think we have a growing kind of group of younger people who genuinely care about pace, sustainability, well-being, and for good reason, because you know, in Gen Z there is greater challenges around stress and mental health, and they want to know what organizations are doing about that, and therefore organizations need to have an answer to that. And I think that, you know, from a digital wellbeing perspective, there's a lot around kind of right to disconnect, and is legislation going to come around right to disconnect and being able to be emailing outside of working hours? I almost think that's the wrong debate, because I do think it's this growing kind of force of people that just genuinely want something different, and that's what's going to be shaping companies' behavior over the next 12 years. And I think that's what 12 months, and that's what we will see, is a nuanced change to this conversation now about the Great Resignation. We're going to be starting to look at, well, why is it that people are moving? What are they moving for? And there's going to be more conversation around well-being, I think.
It's so insightful, and I just want to dig into this piece around social media. Lindsay, I don't know if you want to share. You came off social media, but just share a little bit of your experience, because I'd love Alex's view on the sort of Gen Z, early Gen Z view of social media. But Lindsay, share your experience.
Yeah, during the pandemic, I got too deep into Instagram in particular, and it was making me really unhappy. And when I was researching my book, Recalculating, I read a lot of research about just the mental health you know, ramifications of passive social media scrolling. And what I did was I took myself entirely off of Facebook and Instagram. I doubled down on LinkedIn. Here we are on LinkedIn, and I'm a big fan, and I find it less bad for my mental health. But I've seen in just 4 weeks an extraordinary, I think I text my friends more. I think I make plans with friends more. And I think I'm just a little bit happier and less stressed by not having that social media feed in my face all the time. It's been a huge change, and I'm really glad I did it, but it was a little bit scary, which is kind of a funny thing to say. I was worried I'd be missing out on something, and my experience has been just entirely positive. I'd love to hear your thoughts on a social media detox or cleanse.
Oh, amazing. And I think, well, I'd love to hear, did you find it hard at first, or was it easy from the offset? So kind of intrigued.
So I sort of like let one finger off at a time. So I started muting a lot of people, and I started limiting my time, and I started, you know, trying to change my feed. So I kind of like dribbled off a little bit, and I was really nervous to completely go off. I don't know what I thought I would miss out on. But I told some people, because I didn't want them to think I was being rude by not commenting on their stuff. So I think I did it a little bit step by step. I didn't jump off a cliff, but once I did it, I never thought about it again. I barely think about social media now that I'm not on it. So I think I gave it more thought when I was trying to detach than I ever did before or since.
Oh, amazing. And I know Nikki mentioned before this program started that that you'd actually disconnected over Christmas as well.
Yeah, we had no Wi-Fi in our new house for 2 weeks, and we're in a mobile phone dead zone. So I had just the radio and board games for my 2 boys. And it was a complete revelation of an experience. Could not recommend it enough for feeling a sense of purpose, mindfulness. So yeah, you've got 2 advocates, but I'm interested. What do you think from a Gen Z perspective?
Yeah, sorry. I love hearing these lived experiences, and I think actually it's these lived experiences that really bring it to life. But from a Gen Z perspective, so what we see is that it's not whether you use social media, but it's how you use social media that's the key. And are you using it as a tool to help you achieve your goals? It might be kind of connecting with others or finding out what's happening locally, or are you passively scrolling and consuming content? And that's when there are greater challenges. And also the research shows that social media is worse for mental health and loneliness if you've already got a kind of existing challenge with anxiety or loneliness. Then you can end up in a spiral where you're using social media because of that, but then it's fueling that more. So there is a lot to say, given that kind of Gen Z have been shown to be kind of more lonely, kind of, you know, more digitally connected, but less of a sense of kind of deep connection as well. And also from the mental health perspective, then I think it's absolutely vital to take a intentional and mindful view of where social media is enhancing or detracting from what really matters to you in your life. And you know, we've recently actually launched a brand new webinar, Social Media Your Way, which deals with exactly that. So what are the changes, the nuances that you can make? And it can be things like hiding your newsfeed. There are plugins you can put into your desktop that do that. You can delete the apps from your phone, for instance. But yeah, curating the experience so that it works for you.
Alex, La Via, thank you so much for these incredible insights. I do want to make sure that people can get hold of you, they can read your content. I think Hayley is going to put up, if she hasn't already, on the screen ways in which people can get in touch with Alex. I know people have had a choppy experience listening in this afternoon and this morning, so please do visit Alex on Live More Offline. Before I hand to Lindsay, who will do a quick summary, our in-house narrator, of the points that Alex has shared, I also want to remind people that you're still able to get Strengths Profile this month. It's mentoring month, so we want to make sure that you've got access to Strengths Profile and also the new ebook. And we also, very excitingly, have our new recruitment survey as well, has just been launched. And again, you can see how you can access that at the bottom of the screen. But please do some great tips in there about candidate transparency. So Lindsay, as always, so much rich content from Alex, and so many things I think we can all use for those of us who are supporting Gen Z talent. But what stood out for you? What are your top three?
Alex La Via of Live More Offline, thank you so much for inspiring us to do just that. I love the name of your business. Some of my key takeaways are, number one, don't make assumptions about how other people want to behave digitally, what is stressful or not stressful for them, particularly between employees and managers and between generations. Ask the question, have the dialogue. Number two, be deliberate on your teams. Maybe create a communications charter. I love that idea, to come up with some agreements of how we communicate, what tools we use to communicate, when responses are expected. I thought that was a great tip, even on small teams, to have that conversation. Number three, add digital well-being as a really important topic to recruiting conversations. Gen Zs are going to ask about it, and part of the Great Resignation is that they will leave jobs where they don't feel that their well-being is taken into account. Also, a really good tip to add well-being and digital time management to onboarding training to help people figure out how to use these tools. And finally, I loved your last comment that it's not whether you use social media, but how you use it. I know that Nikki and I have both had that experience, that a break from social media or changing the way that we engage with it is really important. And the key there being that active use of social media to connect, to have groups, to have discussions, to share information is often much more positive for our mental health than passive social media scrolling, which is just going in and zombie-like scrolling through other people's pictures. So Alex La Via, Live More Offline, thank you so much for being our guest. So much value today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And just for those of you who are going to watch episode 30, we have great guests from Line Connect. We have the CEO, Susan Lang, and also her colleague, Rennie Forsyth, and they will be talking about how to support candidates with disability and their amazing Line Connect program. So really look forward to welcoming them 2 weeks from now. Thank you, everybody. I hope the weather conditions wherever you are hopefully easing slightly, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Many thanks.